everybody, it's Jay Robe. I'm going to be doing a video on the Lucena position. I had done one previously, but I had some mistakes in it in the last line that I looked at in the video. So I wanted to update the video to make it error-free and talk a little bit about the Lucena position in more detail than I had before. Now, the Lucena position is what you see on the screen here, and it's a staple of any endgame study book that you can buy. And it's very important to learn and master, especially if you're serious about getting better at chess. Now, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at the staple Lucena position, which is what you see. We're going to take a look at what happens if it's white's turn to move. We're also going to take a look at what happens if it's black's turn to move. But we're also going to take a look at how a draw can actually happen. Because interestingly enough, from this position that you see here on your screen, this is a guaranteed win from white. And in fact, if this position was similarly set up on any file from B to G, it would be a guaranteed win for white, just using the techniques that we're going to cover in the video. However, if you have a similar position on either the A file or the H file, there are some opportunities for black to draw depending on how the pieces are placed. So we'll take a look at those exceptions as well. So let's get started here. What are some characteristics of the Lucena position? Well, one of the most important ones is that you have to have your king in front of your pawn. As you can see here, the white king is on D8 and the white pawn is on D7. Very important to do that. But as in all rook-pawn endgames, you have to utilize all of your pieces if you want to capitalize on the advantage. So somehow this rook is going to have to help support the king in order for this promotion to take place. And how white's going to do that is white's going to bridge the king and the rook together, and we're going to take a look at how that's done. So the first move that white's going to play in this position is rook to F2, landing the check. From here, black can play king over to G7 as a possible option, and now we're going to place the rook onto the fourth rank on F4. And this is a very critical move for white, because what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to bridge the rook and king together to take away the danger that this black rook presents. And the best rank to do that on is the fourth rank, and we're going to see why. It's all about king moves from this point forward. So from here, black can come down to try to harass the rook. It's not a big deal, and white's now going to play king to E7. And you'll notice that the pawn is protecting C8, so this means that the black rook can't come down to C8, and now all of a sudden white's threatening to promote right away. So the only option at black's disposal is to land the check. Once black does so, the king can now come closer towards the rook by moving to D6. Once again, black has to land the check. And once black checks, the king can now sidestep over to E6, and I think you can kind of see the direction that this is going, because white's next move is just crushing. Once the check comes again, now white can play king to D5, and as we can see, once black checks, the rook simply comes over now to D4, and black is pretty much has to resign at this point. If play were to continue, the best move for black would be to take the rook, and then after white recaptures, white's going to have a queen on the board. So that is what happens in the staple position when it's white's turn to move. Now you might have a couple questions regarding black's play in the example, so let's go back to the starting position, and after the rook checks, instead of playing the king to G7, let's take a look at what happens if black tries to get aggressive and move the king now to E6. Well, as you can see here, the pawn is protecting the square on C8. So all white has to do in this position is simply move the king over now to E8. And there's nothing that black can do that's going to stop this pawn from promoting. For example, rook over to D1 is simply met by a promotion. Once the rook recaptures, the rook is pretty much gone and off the table. But that's not the only option that black has in this position. What if black was to play, say, for example, king to G6? So in other words, bringing the king closer towards the rook, that's going to end up on the fourth rank. You might see something like this if your opponent is familiar with the Lucena position. Maybe they want to harass the rook once it gets into position. We're still going to continue to place the rook on the fourth rank, and once the king comes down to attack, the rook can simply swing over now to B4, and there's nothing that black can do to stop the promotion from taking place. For example, king back to F6 is simply met by rook over to E4, and once the king attacks again, the rook simply goes now to E7, and white's going to promote the pawn. For example, rook can attack the pawn, but white can simply move the king over, and after black's next move, promotion, and once again, white is the only player with the rook against a lone black king. So those are some potential variations in the example line that shows that even though black has different moves at its disposal, it's not going to get at anything. White is in a guaranteed win position.